When it comes to worldly people, there's one thing you need to remember. Worldlings have internal unrest, due to the fallen state of mankind, caused by the fall of Adam. So, in daily life, society is designed to deal with this inner unrest. And when it comes to the male population, they deal with this inner unrest by providing external sexual motivation to the men. So government is about regulating the sexual intensity of the males. That's what government is about. And that's why they use flags and those pagan symbols. They use color codes to regulate the sexual motivation of the men. If you look to the Spanish Empire, for example, they use the color red. Why? Because the color red stirs up base urges in the human being, especially in males. So, what King Charles III or Carlos III of the Spanish Empire wanted was to motivate the men to be sexually invested in the empire so they would contribute to the prosperity of the Spanish world. Because under Charles III, commercialization took place in the Spanish Empire. So local men were expected to be financially occupied to contribute to the world economy because Spain governed the world back then. So how are you going to motivate all those men on various continents to collide and work together? You do that by giving them external sexual motivation. And the Spanish flag that was installed in 1785 served this purpose. And that magic worked well. It worked so well that when Napoleon entered Spain in 1808, he was fiercely resisted, and all over the Spanish Empire, everyone stood up and fought for their king, for their empire. So Spain survived the Napoleonic invasion. That's how strong the Spanish nation was. However, the motivation was so intense, it worked so well, that it backfired. Because now all the men in the Spanish Empire were so motivated sexually, and they were so invested in the Spanish Empire, that all of them now wanted to have something to say on how the Spanish Empire's future would be. And it's there that it became obvious that the Spanish Empire was quite big on multiple continents, and the men turned on one another, and the whole Spanish Empire was devoured by its civil wars. Eventually, Spain only remained with Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Until this day, the former Spanish kingdoms in the Americas, today called Latin America, has a ruinous cycle of urban violence, terrorism, drug cartels, and unstable governments. You get what I'm saying here? So, the magic of the Spanish Empire, the red magic, it worked, but the side effects were disastrous. Now, the Spanish king Ferdinand VII attempted to regulate the side effects of the magic by installing a national police force, but it was way too late and it didn't work. The rise continued and the Spanish Empire devoured itself. The Japanese, later in the 19th century, copied this model of the former Spanish Empire to motivate their men to be sexually invested in this empire. It worked! But here's the thing, this red magic needs to have an outlet for the excitement you generate. When you generate this excitement with this red magic, you need projects where they can release this intensity. If you don't have a project that drains this intensity that you've generated, then that generated intensity will become toxic and people will devour one another, as what happened to the Spanish Empire. And this eventually happened to the Japanese Empire also. That's why they became so suicidal that they developed this kamikaze mentality. Now, there is another form of management of sexual intensity of males done by the world, and that's blue motivation. In blue motivation, you use the color blue, that's obvious. You want to calm down the sexual intensity of men. And you do this when there's a lot of social unrest or civil conflict. You want to calm down the men sexually, and by doing that, the men become more docile and more feminine-like. I'm not saying the men automatically become effeminate and gay, but they become more feminine. So look at example Argentina. Argentina used the color blue to signify Spanish nobility because the Spanish nobles used the color blue, while the Spanish Empire used the color red. Argentina, when they were negotiating their independence, they decided to become blue instead of continuing the red tradition of the Spanish Empire because there was a lot of civil unrest that emerged during the transition period of Argentina into independence. So they adopted the color blue both to signify the Spanish nobility, because Argentina's independence was negotiated by Spanish nobles also, and they wanted to calm down the population, similar to Central America. Now, if you look at the European Union, they use a blue flag. The blue magic is meant to calm down the men. Remember, you had the Second World War in which Europeans turned on one another, a lot of trauma, and a lot of sexual violence. It's underreported how much sexual violence is going on during the Second World War in Europe. So to calm down the Europeans, they came with the blue magic. There you, I won't say repress, but you kind of trick the sexual intensity of males to drop. And later, feminism also began to play a role in this. So you have the red magic and the blue magic. Just like in the Matrix, you have the blue pill and the red pill. Just like in the United States, you have the Democrats, blue, and the Republicans, red. One sexually spices you up, the other sexually numbs you down. Both are used in the world to make sure worldlings get along with one another. Why does this system work? Because worldlings, instead of relying on Christ, who is our sex master, they rely on Satan and the fallen angels to do a better job than God himself. God is our master when it comes to sex because he is the head of human sexuality. But when you don't entrust yourself to Christ, you will entrust something or someone else. So if you don't rely on Christ for your sexuality, you are vulnerable to the wiles of Satan. And Satan will manage you through scams, through hoaxes, and through black magic if you choose not to rely on Christ. And that's how the demons, through the shadow government, manage the males of the world. Government is sex management of men. That's what government is all about. That's why they use all those symbolisms. Why? Because worldly men, in general, by default, they have no self-worth. So sexually, they long for external motivation. And this leads to energetic homosexuality or energetic sodomy, in which worldly men submit to the sexual violence of other men, even if that sexual violence is just symbolic. The whole idea of having ranks and titles is sexual aggression. Okay? And men are told that by submitting to the symbolic sexual aggression of society, that they will be men. So that's energetic sodomy right over there. Where this energetic sodomy happens in a spicy, intense way, that's the red magic, or it happens in a calming, docile way, the blue magic, it's the same thing. And most countries today don't want to choose one side because they realize that both have side effects. In the red magic, the men tend to be too spiced up and they turn on one another, literally. In the blue magic, they tend to become so docile that they become so demotivated. And this demotivation can lead to suicidal tendencies, or can even lead to men not being motivated to invest in their families and in the women in their community. So they kind of switch between the red and the blue. That's why in the United States, you have the blue side, blue magic, and the red side, red magic. And the population chooses one side which they want to support. Now, what about green? Green is just a color used to signify witchcraft, and the color green is often used when people just want to escape the whole situation, which is not possible. So now you know what the green parties are for. So, that's it for now. And remember, do not trust the sexual management of Satan. Since when is Satan specialized in sexuality? He's not even a sexual being himself. Well, that's it for now. Keep it on clean with Christ and be at peace.